Hello, hello, Dr. John Jakob Guterson here, the singing psychiatrist. A winter's day in a deep and dark December, I am alone. Yeah, we go through times where we feel alone. We go through times where we feel depressed. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go through a number of talks about the world of depression. First of all, it's important to distinguish between sadness and depression. We all go through times in life where we feel sad, where we feel down in the dumps as part of the human journey. We were created to experience that because by meeting the challenges of sadness, we actually grow and we can become better people. These feelings of sadness usually are from an external source, and they usually resolve ultimately on their own. Yeah, we can quicken the pace. We can use exercise, a good diet, and good sleep to try to help us get through these periods of sadness, but usually they will resolve on their own. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the sort of psychiatric depression, a deep, dark, palpable, what we would call like a biological depression that people go through. The problem is that somebody who goes through the sadness, they say, boy, I've been depressed. I know what depression feels like. So they turn to the palpable depressed person and they say something like, cheer up. Well, cheer up doesn't work. It doesn't resonate for these people. So we're going to talk about this psychiatric depression today. Basically, it consists of 9 symptoms. We're going to go through those. Now, this depression needs to last at least 2 weeks in time, not just a few days, 2 weeks in time, most of the days in a 2-week period of time. The symptoms go like this. First of all, there's depressed mood, times where we just feel deeply, deeply like there's a lack of meaning, a void inside of us, suddenly crying for no reason, extreme sadness, depression, but again, that lasts for at least 2 weeks in time. One other word we use for it is dysphoria. Second, what we call anhedonia. Anhedonia is a lack of joy, a lack of being able to enjoy the things we usually enjoy. Usually you might like sports or movies or books, and suddenly you just don't get any pleasure out of those things. What's happening is we have our neurons in our brain, and they're in our whole body, but especially in our brain, and the neurotransmitters which connect those neurons in our brain, well, they aren't really working on all cylinders. We don't have enough of a neurotransmitter, one of them called serotonin, sort of flowing through our body, and so the communications aren't happening like they should. As a result, a person will experience less joy. They just aren't interested in things that they usually would be fascinated and have pleasure in. The third symptom is the famous symptom of sleep, one of the most common complaints or descriptions that people give me. Sleep, insomnia, unable to sleep, not able to fall asleep or stay asleep or waking up early. In depression, these symptoms get even more intense. There also can be a hypersomnia, sleeping too much. I can't get myself out of bed. I'm just sort of frozen in bed. The fourth symptom is appetite, an extreme loss of appetite that people have. Again, this is related to the anhedonia that I just talked about. They just lose their pleasure in eating and their weight begins to go down. Obviously, this can be very significant. Then, of course, there can be overeating, eating too much, which, of course, many people experience. People eat because they're trying to fill that void that they have inside of them. This symptom has to do with loss of energy, fatigue, lying around, being a couch potato. You just don't have the get up and go that you used to have. The sixth symptom is actually getting sort of irritable and agitated, tons of anxiety that can result. I think this is because when somebody is feeling real down in the dumps or they are not having joy, they get frustrated. What's going on? And so it spurs a lot of internal irritability and agitation. Anger. Of course, I think it was Freud who said that depression is anger turned inward. The seventh symptom is a lack of concentration, poor focus. When the neurons aren't connecting, when the neurotransmitters aren't working like they should, you're going to wind up not being able to focus like you should. Of course, it's going to affect somebody's work. Oftentimes, this particular symptom can get confused with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where people have a hard time maintaining attention. So, of course, it's the job of the psychiatrist to tease this out and to come to the right arena of diagnosis, because this affects treatment. Symptom number 8 is to have excessive feelings of guilt and shame, to feel absolutely terrible about oneself, helpless, hopeless. Of course, many people go through feelings of guilt and shame for all sorts of reasons. Things in their upbringing, they begin to have distorted thoughts about themselves. In depression, these get incredibly intense. And the 9th, the last symptom, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, is when people begin to think that they just don't want to exist anymore here on planet Earth. To have a death wish. Now, there could be a death wish or there can be suicidality. There's a difference. Death wish is what we call a passive death wish. If God was to take my life, if I was not to wake up tomorrow morning, I really wouldn't mind that. But they aren't actually putting together any kind of a plan or any kind of no intent. Suicidality is when things get to the point where they really seriously believe that they should not be here, and they put together a plan, they think of a way of doing it, and they have an intention to do it. In these cases, people usually need to be in the safety of a psychiatric hospital to protect themselves against themselves. I have worked in psychiatric hospitals over the years, and I must say what happens to these people is what's going on inside of them is they really truly feel that the world would be better off without them. My kids would be better off without me. And so they start going through a serious suicidal plan with intention. These are the 9 symptoms of depression. From a diagnostic criteria perspective, you have to have 5 of the 9 in order to be, to be diagnosed with major depressive disorder. So we're only talking about the symptoms. We aren't talking about treatment. We'll certainly get into treatment in future talks. But last, I just want to say what I've recognized over the years is really the crux for most people is the fact that they really don't have any sense of a purpose or mission in their life. They wake up every day just sort of going through the day, and then that puts them more vulnerable to a depressive episode. They don't know who they are. They aren't in touch with the real self, because we all have this thing inside of us. We call it a soul. The soul is the essence of who we are. If you know who you are and you know what your mission is, then you're way ahead and you're much more resilient to an episode of depression. It still can happen because people may have the DNA, they may have the biology that makes them susceptible to a depression, even if they do know essentially who they are and what their mission is. Of course, these are things that we will continue to talk about. I thank you. This is Dr. John Yaakov Guterson signing off.